In this edition of the Table of Content, Albert and I will talk about the deceptively simple Aesop fable, The Wind and the Sun. Find out who's stronger on this edition of the Table of Content. Stay tuned. Thanks for joining us here at the Table of Content. My name is Michael, and I'm joined with my co-host, Albert. Albert, how are you today?
Doing pretty good, Michael. Glad to be here.
Great. So today we have the joy of talking about that famous Aesop's fable, The Wind and the Sun. And so we've recorded this on our audio theater. You can go check it out and listen to the recording as it's read. And then also, if you're not familiar with the story, we can probably just jump right into it. It's fairly simple and straightforward. Albert, you want to give us a recap of the story?
Sure. And actually, I'm pretty excited because we've talked about another Aesop fable before, and you were pretty excited about Aesop fables. So I was thinking Michael's really going to be excited to talk about another Aesop fable.
Yes. Right. Yes.
So really, I mean, Michael's not joking. I mean, this is a really short story. And let's just cover the whole premise without having to really try to break it up. We have two opposing forces of nature. We have the sun and we have the wind, and they basically, all right, hey, I'm stronger. No, I'm stronger. All right, well, let's put it to the test. And there's someone walking by. And basically they make a bet and say, I will make that guy take his hat and his coat off. I'm like, all right, well, let's see what you can do. And the sun's like, go ahead, wind, have at it. And the wind just pummels the guy, with, cold and bluster, and does everything he can. And what ends up happening is the guy hunkers down. He's like, well, I got to hold on to my coat tighter. I got to hold on to my hat tighter. And the wind eventually gives up. And the sun's like, all right, my turn. And the sun comes out and basically just shines in all of its brilliance. And, the sun being, from a scientific explanation, and this is a poor scientific explanation, a huge fiery ball of gas emits a ton of heat. So the sun is beating down with all of his heat on this fellow, and he's wearing a coat and a hat. So the guy's like, wow, it is too hot. So he takes off his coat and his hat, and the sun wins, And then there's this, of course, with Aesop, there's morals. And the moral here is kindness affects more than severity.
Right. So
wind, sun, they make a bet. The wind loses, the sun wins. And we should take away from this that the sun, in his kind ways, was able to make the man do something. So that was a great episode of the Table of Content. Thank you all for tuning in.
Tune in next time.
Tune in next time.
That's right. Oh, that was a great summary, Albert. Right. But I understand the moral that's to be learned here. And that's it. And what is the moral that we should be learning?
Well, I mean, right. So let's start. Let's start with what Aesop said, right? Aesop says that we should be learning, quote, kindness affects more than severity. All right. So let's start there. So I think this is the third time that I've talked about, wishing that the world would have a little bit more kindness in it, and that the world would be a different place if everyone did one act of kindness. And I don't get tired of saying that. You might get the audience may be tired of me saying it. However, I don't get tired of saying it because I believe it. I believe it that there is a lot more to gain from kindness. I wish I could remember in college, I bought this really slick poster at this book sale they had on the campus. And it was like some black and white poster and some like old hand holding some like kid's hand, and it was real artsy, whatever, and contemporary. And it was some Chinese proverb about kindness. Like basically the same concept. Kindness is better. And, it's probably been said in multiple ways throughout the centuries, throughout the millennia, kindness is going to get you further than severity.
Right.
So I believe that kindness is a great force in the world, and we are lacking in kindness.
Yes.
So whenever, I didn't get the copyright date on Aesop's writing of this, but whenever this was, and this was not last year or 5 years ago or 20 years ago, whenever this was written or the idea was conceived, the thought of kindness is better was prevalent enough then. Like, we want to believe, oh, the world must have been a nicer place before, and now we have all these sort of terrible things that surround us. Well, the world has been going through a lot of junk for most of its life. Even the dinosaurs had a rough time of things.
Right.
So the world has not known a period of time outside of the short window of time from creation to the point of the fall of man, of really not of not having something where kindness would benefit it.
Right. Right. According to the Metropolitan Museum of Art website, the author Aesop was a Greek who lived more or less around the years 620 through 560 BC. So 620 years before Christ.
So let's say we do the math now. We're in 600 and we're in the year 2021. So basically we're talking about 2,500 to 2,600 years ago. Aesop was trying to tell people, hey, you should be kind.
Yes. And that's the beauty of an Aesop fable. Again, it's deceptively simple. It's taken from nature, the way things are in nature. And there's a lot of use of analogy there. The sun is warm, it's comfortable. The wind especially the north wind, is cold and harsh and uncomfortable. And so there are those elements that come into play. And as I was reading this story, I remember seeing one of these plaques in this businessman's office, or a friend. I can't remember clearly what it was, but he was like former military, and it had in this plastic said, "The beatings will continue until morale improves." And I just thought, it sort of dovetails nicely with this tale. Like the wind is trying to achieve a purpose and is just doing its best, and that purpose is not being achieved. Why? Because it's resorting to severity, uncomfortableness, or quote unquote, in this sense, the beatings, right? You're all going to, get punished until we achieve our purpose. And that's not a healthy way to go about things.
Sure.
Whereas the sun radiates its beauty, its warmth, as you were saying, so like eloquently, this burning ball of gas, like, hundreds of thousands of miles away, is shining and is able to make the person take off its coat.
Here's a good question. Okay. So we want to say that the sun was going about it in a more gentle way, right? But the sun, from a physical standpoint, is an extremely powerful force, right? And all it did was basically get hotter, but it's still an extremely strong force. So, right. But let's go with it, right? Let's go with the story's angle, is that Aesop was saying that the sun was being kind in the way that he did it. He didn't try he didn't try to beat it off of the guy with a ball of fire. He didn't try to shoot it off of the guy. So, but that being said,
good point.
That being said, I think we sometimes are like, well, I'm being kind, I didn't hit the guy upside the head, you're like, I'm being kind in how I'm trying to, get this particular outcome. I was talking
Right.
to so and so, and I didn't manhandle them, I didn't beat them over the head with a stick,
Right.
I didn't threaten them. I said this, but perhaps though the words that you chose were a little too strong still. People have different
Mm.
emotional states and different sensitivities, and one person interprets something differently. Like someone
Mm.
else might have been really angry with the sun, being like, because I
Mm.
know uh, I live in South Texas. It's really hot down here. Like it's hot. Like
Mm.
we're talking, high 90s most of the summer, heat indexes creeping towards 110, so that when it's 90 degrees outside,
Right.
I feel like it's really cool. That's what
Right.
happens when you climatize. Now, go up north, and there's some people who really love that weather. So when then they
Right.
come down and they experience this heat, or on the rare occasions when it hits a really high 90s day, they're
Mm.
actually really sort of disgruntled.
Mm.
Like,
Mhm.
wow, the sun, like I wish it was cooler. They would
Right.
probably welcome a strong wind that was cool, so they could actually have to put on a coat, you know. So
Mhm.
my point being is that sometimes still a great force can still end up sort of having an effect of not being kind, even if that's the intention. So while I appreciate Aesop's sort of simplicity, and yes, and we're all going to end this episode knowing that kindness is the path to follow, but I think that
Yeah.
we need to be careful. I think we need to be careful because we could interpret something as I was being very kind, and the person on the receiving end, or whatever the thing is that's receiving our quote unquote kindness, may interpret it completely differently.
Mm.
So we need to be cautious and not just sort of oversimplify it and just say,
Sure.
hey, you can be like the sun. You can be
Right.
like a burning ball of gas and go up on people, and people will be very happy to meet you in person. Be like,
Right.
well, you might want to tone it down a little bit.
Right. You're right. That's a great point that you bring out. The sun is a powerful force, but does not sort of like kill the person with its quote unquote kindness. He just is enough and it's able to be received in a way that affects the outcome, right? Yeah, the sun could have been fierce about doing what it did as well, and probably could have gotten the same result, uh, but at the same time, yeah, we shouldn't be in our acts of kindness. We should be attentive to how the acts of kindness are being received, because it's not just the content of what we're trying to do, it's also the way in which we do it, the form, and how it's being perceived or how it's being received. Another thought came to mind. You attract more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. Kind of the same type of lesson to be learned. And I had a question for you, Albert. It's wondering, with those type of temperatures in Texas, have you ever tried to bake cookies in your car?
I have been tempted to try to cook things on the asphalt, which
Yeah.
seems to resemble the extreme heat of a griddle. But
Mm,
no, I have not attempted to bake cookies in my car.
okay. I was just curious.
I assume I could just get a roll of Toll House cookie dough and throw it in my van and let it sit there from 3 p.m. to
Mm.
6 p.m. And minimally, my van would smell amazing.
I was going to say, right? Yeah,
It,
like
it
a
may not
bakery.
really be cooked in a way that it would be safe to eat, but darn it, it would smell amazing.
That's right. You know, as you were talking as well, I was thinking of you're talking about acts of kindness being perceived. It just came to mind uh, that scene in Les Miserables where Jean Valjean steals a silver candlestick from the bishop who has offered him hospitality
Right,
for the evening.
right.
And then he's caught down the road um, by Javert, I think is the name of the policeman.
Well,
Uh,
I don't think it was. I don't think Javert caught him at that moment. I think it was just the
okay.
local sort of
Oh,
police. I forget what the name in French is like for the local police. There's a name for
okay.
it. Anyways, but go on.
But anyways, it was that the bishop has had an injustice committed against him he has every right to like just come crashing down on Jean Valjean, and instead shows him kindness. He says, "Wait, there's a mistake. You forgot the other one, the matching set. How I was offended that you didn't, et cetera, et cetera." And he made it into this big act of kindness, and it rocks Jean Valjean's world and changes the direction of his life. And there's a big dramatic scene where he's wrestling with like, who am I, right? What am I going to do from this point on? And that's many times with our acts of kindness. The world needs kindness, and we'll never ultimately know the effects, long-term effects of the kindness that we do, or the kind deeds that we do. But they're out there, and they stand for something.
Right.
And the world hopefully will be a little bit better because we do them.
I'm actually kind of glad that you made the Les Miserables reference, only because of the segue to a faith point that I wanted to make.
Mm.
I was talking about a great force could still be perceived, or could still overdo it and could sort of mess up the act of kindness, right? So
Yeah.
Aesop says, the sun was being kind. Okay. However, I was thinking, it's like, well, wait a second. There is a sun. There is an SON, sun, that is a great force who won't ever mess up the kindness and the charity of trying to sort of direct us towards a path and a life of peace and happiness. And of course, yes, for anyone who hasn't caught on yet, I am talking about Jesus Christ. So let's clarify. So
Yes.
the Father, the Son, great force, great power, the creator of the universe, the Son, the Savior, great force, unimaginable love, immeasurable love, great power, great ability, everything that could be endowed to a God, to our God, but never overdoing it, never sort of,
right.
that was really harsh. I feel like that wasn't kind, God. No. Now, Old Testament, New Testament, you read some things in there, and there's some tough pills to swallow, but it's never in a way that should be interpreted as like, wow, that really wasn't kind. No. That was some honest truth, which is necessary along our journey.
Right.
And kindness can be, intertwined with truth, so that we can sort of journey to the correct point in our lives. So I just was thinking about that. I was saying, yeah, there is a great force, more powerful than the sun, that will always sort of act in a way that will never be sort of forceful, and will never sort of be sort of too much. We're never going to get our arm twisted behind our back.
Right. That it's true. I'm probably going to botch this phrase, but there's something along the lines that it takes true strength to be gentle, right?
Right.
And that's what kindness to be. Well, I wonder, that'd be kind of interesting if gentleness is an essential aspect of kindness, right? Just that sense of not overpowering. And I think you said that really well, Albert, that God is, he's kind. He's also strong and powerful, but he's kind and gentle in how he goes about that. And it's interesting. We're talking about these Greek authors, in their ideologies and their worldviews. Creation was this effect of this cataclysmic, Herculean effort on behalf of the gods and the demigods. And then we're striving, and then there's creation. And then the Christian worldview is that, no, God just commanded with a word, and it was, let there be light, let there be earth, let there be, the sea, and let there be sea creatures. And he creates effortlessly, and I feel like that's the beautiful aspect of being a Christian is our God doesn't somehow need to prove himself. Well, he's all powerful, so he doesn't need to show effort in that sense.
I like just the thought, just a quick note about creation and about how he created man, right? So he sort of
Mm.
breathed life into
Mm-hmm.
man. It wasn't something out of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Like
It's
making
alive.
yeah, it wasn't like that. It wasn't lightning crashing overhead and raising up the body to the heavens to be charged to the no. It
Yeah.
was just I'm gonna breathe life into man, and yeah, it was all very peaceful.
Yeah. Right. And, getting a little bit more into that Genesis text, just with everything else in creation, God just commands it. Let there be this, let there be that. But then before he creates man or humans, he has a little dialogue with himself. It's almost like he's relishing what he's about to do. He's like, well, let's make man in our own image. The fact that we have this wonderful capacity to think and to discover. And then we also have this wonderful capacity to make decisions for ourselves, and all of that sort of, those activities point to a spiritual, eternal soul. And it really is amazing.
The we've talked a lot about the sun in the story, and we haven't talked a lot about the actual north wind.
Mm.
And again, this is a fable, and we can take a lot out, we can put a lot in, we can interpret a lot of different ways, you know. But we first want to assume, and I say this based off of the simple thing that what does it say? The wind began to blow as hard as it could upon the traveler, but the harder he blew, the more closely did the traveler wrap his cloak around him, till at last the wind had to give in despair.
Right.
So, my introduction to the story was a cartoon that I saw when I was very small, and it was like made like in Canada. It's like a 1970 something animation of this story, and they actually there's two kind of versions of this story. So I want to make sure the listeners understand this. So there's like the north wind and the sun, and then there's the wind and the sun. I didn't get a chance to kind of research which one is sort of more correct. They're both, credited to Aesop. I'll let you all kind of do that. But so this cartoon version of the North Wind and the Sun, the North Wind is made to kind of look like this dark gray sort of beastly character with huge hair made of clouds and kind of gnarly fingers and bony cheeks. And then the sun is just this pleasant, glowing, array of kindness. And so you see the north wind just sort of like blowing and looking really angry and mean.
Yeah.
So in my head, I have this sort of, angry north wind, this angry wind that just wants to be cold and wants to be blustery and wants to sort of, just be the anti-sun, But, in the story that we read here, the version that we have, to at last the wind had to give in despair. So they actually, in this version here, the wind, just the wind in our version, is sort of given this small ounce of emotional sort of strife.
Yeah.
Not just that the wind went away angry. The wind crossed his arms, huffed, and kicked the ground, and and acted like a 5-year-old throwing a tantrum. The wind gave in despair, right? So it was a bet, and like you said, you noticed how the sun sort of stacked the odds in his favor. And the wind was like, okay, I'll go with this. And the wind's like, oh, I can't. I tried, and I thought that I could, but I just couldn't. And despair sets in for the wind. Where do we fit in the wind? Like where are we as people in the wind. And I think we see that a lot. Like we're convinced that we can do something. And
Mm,
and let's stick with the story. We're convinced that we can do something with force, right? We're convinced like,
yeah.
you know what? I'm going to make this work. I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to
Yeah.
do this. I'm going to beat it with a hammer till it goes in, and then it's either going to break, or I'm going to force this person to do what I want them to do, and they're
Yeah.
going to break, or
Right.
or whatever. But what happens most of the time is our heart ends up hurting afterwards. We've ended up breaking
Yes.
ourselves as well because we tried so hard and we were convinced without a doubt, it's like, this is just what I'm going to do and it's going to make everything better. But then what
Right.
happens in the end, we end up finding ourselves in despair because it either didn't work or ended up having terrible consequences. Like we may have made it
Mm,
happen. Like if the
mhm,
wind had actually blown the coat off, right?
mm.
So the in the cartoon version, in the North Wind and the Sun, that they really emphasize how cold that it is, right? This is a really
Yeah.
frigid air. What if the North Wind had blown it off, but had been blowing so hard he had caused the man to hurt himself, or he had
Mm,
caused the man to freeze? He'd end up causing some harm to his life. That wasn't the intention, right?
right.
So, we're a lot of times in the wind's position, but we end up wishing that we had been in the sun's side. And we're like, if I had just stopped, if I had
Right.
just breathed, if I had just been kind, this would
Right.
have been a lot different.
Right. And that, that takes a tremendous amount of character to, well, first of all, to in the moment where one is feeling frustrated or like you were saying, and there's that temptation to severity to elicit the desired outcome. It takes tremendous, I think, amount of presence of mind and just character formation, self-control, not to give in to that temptation, right? Like you were saying, because theoretically the north wind could have elicited that outcome with extreme severity, but then at the same time, you're also damaging the person who has a coat on, right? Frostbite, et cetera, et cetera. And that's true. And that's not kindness. Okay, yes, you got the objection, or you've got the objective accomplished, you achieved the purpose, but at what cost, right? At emotional damage or whatever, or physical damage, right? And you know, and it's just interesting. I'm thinking in terms of just acts of kindness in the world. That frustration can come about. I think one when we try to do kindness on our own terms and not really are concerned with the true good of the person, or one not really perceiving their what they truly need at that moment. There's that saying from the famous business sales guru Zig Ziglar. He said, "quote People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." And I think that sort of points to that severity is not going to really, it's not going to help. It's, yes, you can get limited results, but those results will be limited, impoverished, or at great cost.
Kindness really does seem to sort of win, and hopefully we can somehow come to that realization where, you know, and if you've been a north wind, it's okay.
Mm,
I'm talking to everyone out there. If you've been a north wind, if you've been blustery, if you have tried to force something off, okay, I'm not coming down on you, but my point is, I would just hope that we can all see that the kindness and being a little bit more like the sun,
mm,
and gently warming up, uh, can do a lot more and have a lot more impact.
right, right. But the idea is right. The person has to feel that they're loved. And going back before we started talking about the north wind, just as sort of to put a close on the talking about the sun and talking about God, that's really the root of all act of kindness and the supreme motivation for all act of kindness. If we could just see each other as creatures of the same God, as sons and daughters that God himself loves and identifies with, then that should be motivation and strength for us to overcome any type of whatever emotional obstacles that we experience towards loving each person that we come into contact with. It's the fact that, hey, we are all essentially good. Yeah, like you were saying, we have our moments, but each person is worthy of being loved. Why? Because God loved them into existence. But I guess if you want to talk about culture and transforming culture, then that becomes a little bit more of a challenge. How do we do that? How do we create a culture, a society where people actually like love each other because they see each other as lovable and worthwhile in God's eyes?
And that's a big challenge for the world, to see
Sure.
every person as a child, as a creation, as a miracle of God,
Mm,
and to treat them so. Because I think we're filled in a world right now where people treat a lot of people really terribly because of their beliefs, their political affiliations,
yeah.
their who they identify as, and and take all that away. Whether there's some moral issues
Yeah.
with take all that away, the person is still a human. The person is still a child of God, and if we all saw everyone that way, this is a
Yeah.
human being who deserves
Yeah.
to be loved, treated with
Yeah.
respect, treated with kindness.
Mm,
Again, a different world, a
yeah.
much different world than what we experience right now. If we all saw every single person around us as a human being who deserves to be treated well.
Right. Right. I'm going to paraphrase, and it's out of context. I wish I had the reference, but I think Pope John Paul II mentioned that at one point. He says the solution to the vast majority of Western culture's problems is going to be a re-emphasis of the value of the human person. And conversely, the source of Western culture's problems and the true battle will be the dignity of the human person, or the stripping away of the dignity of the human person. And like you were saying, we see that all over the place. And maybe that's a conversation that's going beyond the scope of kindness, the sun and the north wind. But it's true. If we don't show kindness to things or people that we don't value, right? And if we don't value them, then why show them kindness or respect, right? So that kindness and respect has to be rooted in sort of a deeper love. Yeah. Well, I think. Would you like to wrap it up, Albert?
Sure, sure. I like Aesop. I think
Mm,
Aesop's good because, I mean, how short is this? But there's so much really to sort of pull out of
mm,
Aesop, and I'd be willing to bet that Aesop knew that. Aesop's like,
yeah.
I don't got to say much. I just have to choose the right words, and then people
Hmm.
can talk about this and write dissertations and theses on. Or what is it? Is it theses or theses? What is it? You would know as a professor.
Theses would be plural, like more than one, and then thesis would be just one.
Okay, so theses, right? So, people writing theses on this sort of stuff. I'm sure, there's all sorts of, book clubs and
Mm,
conversations,
hmm.
dedicated to Aesop's fables because there's so much more going on inside. So I appreciate it, and always good to sort of see what he has going on in his writings.
Right. Yes. Isn't that interesting how he's this ancient Greek philosopher, or Greek, not philosopher, Greek storyteller, 600 years before Christ, and still sparking debate and conversation today. It's a testimony to the greatness of his storytelling. But thank you. I really appreciate you being on the show today. And so if you haven't listen to our production of this, go to waobaudiotheater.org. Listen to it there. And also go out there and be kind. Go and do acts of kindness.
Yes, please, 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 acts of kindness. The world will be better for it.
So thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you the next time.